Welcome to the Blissful Life, a podcast where we awaken the wisdom of self and explore the lessons, the rituals, and the pathways to inner bliss. I'm your host, Regina Lawless, former corporate executive turned author and spiritual teacher. And I'm on a mission, y'all, to help people connect to and express their divine self so they can make their unique impact on the world. If you've been feeling like there is more to life than the hustle and grind, then you found your tribe. It's time to breathe and relax into the blissful life. Welcome to the Blissful Life podcast. I am so excited to have you join me for this very first episode. This is going to be an adventure that we embark on together, and one that has been a few years in the making. So I started this podcast because I have been on this journey to find my own bliss. And I'll talk about what bliss means to me or how I would describe it in just a moment. But I wanted to give you a little of the inspiration of why I would even be qualified to be talking to you about bliss. For me, I won't get into my whole backstory in this first episode. We'll weave some of those stories in over time. But the most important thing that I wanted to share at this point is that I came to discover bliss through tragedy. So in May of 2021, I lost my beloved husband. His name is Al. And Al passed away suddenly from a heart attack. I was 40 years old. And up until that point, I had lived my life with a plan. I had a blueprint laid out for me. I wanted to rise up the corporate ranks, be successful, be able to, of course, provide for my family and myself. And I was able to do all of those things, which was amazing. I, went to college, check, got the job, the corporate job, check, followed all the rules, did what I had to do, said what I had to say, play the game. You do have to, especially as a person of color, especially as a woman, if you want to be in certain spaces, you have to contort yourself or comport yourself a certain way. And so I did all of that. I played the game the way it's supposed to be played and rose up the ranks eventually to become an executive at Meta, one of the largest tech companies in the world. And for a time, I was happy, at least on the surface. I had all the things. I had a house in the suburbs. I had a husband, a dog, a son, a nice car, money in the bank, stock, all the things that we're told that we're supposed to want in this American game. And then, like that, my husband passed away. And I lost every sense of the reality that I had built. I was not only disillusioned, but in despair. And despair doesn't even begin to cover the depth of pain and grief and just what is this? Like, what am I here for? What am I supposed to be doing? The person that I was rocking with for 21 years of my life, that is a lifetime in and of itself. The person that I went to bed with, woke up to, was suddenly gone from this physical realm. And so it shook me to my core. However, a beautiful thing happened as I started to heal over the months and years since that traumatic incident and really take stock of my life and start to come back to life again, is how I like to describe it. That's when I started to discover what bliss really is. I think it's in the contrast of life that we really learn what a thing is. So, how can you really know what love is if you've never lost it? How can you know what joy is if you haven't experienced pain? So, I now join the ranks of so many people who have either lost a loved one or had some sort of tragedy up in their life And through that, if you can sift through the ashes, if you can have the courage to look that thing in the face and stare it down and wrestle down the pain, the grief, the anguish, the disillusionment, if you can come through that, then in that thing is a gift. And for me, on the other side of that grief was not only love, a deeper love for my husband, a deeper love for myself, and now a deeper love of everyone and everything that I'm blessed to come into contact with each day. And so that really is the impetus for the blissful life. I spell it FULL because I believe bliss is our birthright. And I believe we all are here to live our bliss. And we all can carve out and return to that inner bliss. We just need to know how to change up some of the things that we're doing. I think it's so easy to get distracted in this life. And the blissful life, I want this to be just a reminder, a peaceful reminder that you can always come home to bliss, which is very much an internal state of being. And part of my regular routine now, how I stay in bliss, is I meditate daily. And in meditation, I sat and I meditated on this question of what is bliss? And I'll share some more guidance that I received in that meditation at the end of this episode. But for now, the definition I want to provide you with on what is bliss is an internal state of being. Bliss is a state of being in connection with the divine. So I am one who very much believes in God, the universe, all that is, the Most High, that there is something guiding order on this planet. There is a universal source. There is an energy, there is a consciousness that we all share. And in that essence, in that spirit that we are all part of this great source, this great energy, this great spirit. In that is where our bliss lies. It is that state, that essence that is unchanging regardless of the circumstances that happen around us. There is that internal state of bliss that we can find, that we can cultivate, that we can remember, because it really is a remembering. Bliss is the state that we come from. We just forget over time, or we get distracted, or we get depressed, we get sad, we get pulled in all the different directions away from that inner blissful state. So, my intention with this podcast is to share the stories, the lessons I've learned, the rituals, the pathways through me, but also through a lot of other guests. So, you're going to hear me bringing on people who have found their bliss. And I'm really excited to have conversations with them and see how they came about returning to that state and how they practice to stay there, because it is so easy to get distracted and knocked off your square. So it takes us daily. It's almost like physical activity. Like, right? If you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to be a bodybuilder or whatever, you're trying to get in better physical shape. It's not just pulling up to the gym one day, checking it off your list and like, whoo, now I'm about to be in the Olympics. No. It is daily or 4 times a week or 3 times a week, whatever it is, but it's a consistent routine that gets you those results. And I see bliss, anything related to spirituality, as the same thing. We have to be open to putting in the work to get those spiritual gains. So, a couple other things I wanted to talk about in this first episode of the Blissful Life. I wanted to just share a little bit more about what are the things I did to find my bliss. You're probably thinking like, oh my gosh, like she said her husband died, like that in and of itself is a lot to take in and a lot to move through. Anyone who's lost anyone knows all of the just confusing emotions. It's an onslaught of every single emotion that you can imagine. And it's like a roller coaster. One day you might be good, the next day you're crying in the kitchen. You hear the person's, voice, or you remember something that they said to you, or you see their picture. Like grief is really one of those, it's a universal thing. We all go through it, but it's so different how everybody experiences it. So moving through that, it forced me to just look at life differently and use, I won't even say use different tools in my toolkit. I had to find different tools. These were tools that I didn't even have in my toolkit. Like if I'm being real, because I'd never lost anyone that close to me. So, a few things that I did that now in hindsight, I can look back and see, okay, that's how I got to this state of inner bliss. The first thing I did was really stop having any specific expectations. So, that probably sounds like crazy work if you are someone like me who was type A, go getter. I told you in the beginning of this episode that I had my whole life planned out for me, or so I thought. I was always someone that could set a goal and get it done. Like there was no question in my mind. If I set out to do something, consider it done. Like knock that off the list. So for me to suddenly have no expectations, just that is not how I am wired. But something that I came to understand is that having intentions is one thing, trying to control the outcome is an entirely different thing. And throughout my entire life, I had always been the girl trying to control the outcome. If I can get this degree, that puts me in a better position to get promoted into leadership. If I take this job, I was like all about gaming things out. I was playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers. Like I was always trying to be 2, 3 steps ahead. And if something went wrong, okay, I always had a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, which is exhausting, by the way. But it was how I felt safe. That somehow, if I'm going to be in these spaces that I am battling, just corporate alone is chaotic, no matter who you are. Then you layer on these different identities, like being a Black woman in mostly white male environments. It's a whole other set of pressure to have to behave a certain way or risk being perceived as unprofessional or loud or angry. You fill in the blanks. So I had a lot of that pressure on myself. And the way that I tried to control for the uncontrollable variables was to go out of my way to always be on my game and try to outgame the system. Then my husband died, and I'm like, oh, okay. So there really isn't any control. Like, there really isn't any way to prevent the worst things from happening or the best things for that matter. There is no way for us as human beings to control every single outcome, nor should we. Because as scary as that may sound to some of you listening, that what do you mean my actions can't control for everything in every scenario? It seems scary, but I'll tell you what's on the other side of relinquishing your control: peace and surprises. Peace and surprises are on the other side of relinquishing control. I discovered a newfound sense of peace because now all of a sudden I'm not trying to play God or play all knowing, omnipotent. Like I can, in my human mind, that can't possibly see even all the chess pieces on the board, let alone the board itself. I'm up here trying to make it make sense with my human mind instead of relying on the infinite wisdom and the magic that is beyond the physical realm, beyond what the human mind can even conceive. So I learned to just surrender. You hear this a lot in spiritual teachings, and I really believe it's fundamental to living a blissful life. Learning to surrender control and not have any particular expectations of how things are supposed to go and when it's supposed to happen. That was the beautiful gift of my husband passing. One of many is learning to not have any set expectations. So, the second thing that I learned, and I think what made a difference for having more bliss in my life, was starting to question the life that I had built and the life that I was leading. So, I told y'all earlier that I had made it up to the executive ranks. I was an executive at Meta, specifically on the Instagram side. I was the head of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you know, you know, there are a lot of people that are throwing that term around, scapegoating DEI, have no idea what DEI really means or what we do in that profession. So shout out to the people who support DEI and know what DEI really is, and the hard work and dedication and strategy that goes into that profession. So shout out to my fellow practitioners of DEI and all the beautiful work we do to make sure that everyone is supported, that we are in service to. So let me get off my DEI soapbox for a second. But it took a lot, of course, to get to a point where I could even be considered for a role like that. I had built a 20-year career, or almost, for about 18 years before I joined Instagram. So an 18-year career of grinding to get to a point where I had the experience, I had the credentials to land an executive role at one of the biggest companies in the world, certainly one of the biggest tech companies. I had done a lot and was accustomed to thinking a certain way, behaving a certain way, to maintain that status of success, to be able to work the way that I was working. There's a lot of work that goes into being a leader. You're almost always on. It's hard to take time off and all the things. And so when my husband died, I actually took 3 months off for bereavement leave. And during that time, that was the first time I had had time off that was not a vacation, that was not due to a surgery or birth. The last time I took more than 2 weeks off was the birth of my son. And that was at the beginning of my career. So having this bereavement leave, I took 3 months off after my husband died, and it gave me time and space to think and really to start questioning what what was life supposed to be. What did I think my life was going to turn out to be? I certainly didn't think I was going to be widowed at 40. The more important questions I began to ask was, why? Like, I really started to ask, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? What am I meant to learn from this? How am I going to get through this? Um, all of those existential questions that you could imagine. What did I do wrong? Could I have done something differently? What is the meaning of life? What is my purpose going forward? And it was in those questions that my mind started to wander and seek answers. And I think so often we stay set in the answers that we already have, the things that we already know, as opposed to expanding our mind, our awareness, our consciousness, and seeking out the things that we don't know, or questioning, having the courage to question what we think we know, what we've been told by our religion, what we've been told by our parents, what we've been told by our society, right? Media does a lot to program us into thinking and behaving a certain way. Our friend group, or Community, who we surround ourselves with, has a lot of influence on what we think, how we behave. So when your foundation gets shaken, like was the case with me with my husband dying suddenly, I threw almost all of it out the window, at least in a mental sense. There was nothing that was off the table for me to question. And in that, I went on this journey to not only look for information outside of myself, books, podcasts, um, you name it. I was seeking for this spiritual guidance. I wanted to know beyond the physical because I could still feel my husband's presence. I could still see him in my mind's eye. I could still dream about him. And I do believe that he came to me in those dream states. So I knew that there was something beyond what I could physically see. I just didn't know how to explain it. It certainly wasn't anything that I learned in all of my years going to church. And so I started to go on this quest, and it led me to start doing yoga. It led me to meditation. It led me to stillness. And in those experiences, I started to receive the answers I had been searching for. And it wasn't until I learned to come into that inner state of stillness and peace that the answers to some of those big questions about who we are, why we're here, why I'm here began to surface. So I think it's really important. I think in so many ways, we are programmed to not lean into our own internal resources. Just think about how many times, just even think about the commercials that you hear. Every single commercial that you hear is convincing you to buy something. And usually, if you are a woman in particular, it's convincing you to buy it because you need to look a certain way. The marketers, the advertisers want to convince all of us that we're not enough in some way or we don't have something in some way. But I think it's particularly insidious for women because there's so much marketing around our beauty and our age and things like that. But all of us can fall victim to the advertising around you need this product, you need this. Why aren't you wearing this? Why aren't you listening to this? Why aren't you going here? Why haven't you bought that? And so all of it is designed to around making you want to obtain something external, something outside of yourself to make you happy instead of turning your attention back to yourself and digging for the answers to those questions internally, coming back, sitting with yourself and realizing that there's really nothing you need external. Every resource, everything you need is inside. And so that's why I think it's really powerful to start to question the things that you're buying into, to question the images you're consuming, the content you're consuming, whether that be social media or traditional media. What are the stories you're telling yourself? What are the ways that you may be blocking out other ideas? We know that the algorithms are designed to keep you in a very limited view, and you can go down the rabbit hole and be radicalized in just a matter of clicks into a certain point of view if you're not consuming alternate points of view or just being willing to think critically about, does this even make sense? And most importantly, not even if it makes sense or not, because even if it is logical, does it resonate with me? Does it hit my heart space? Do I feel that this thing is true? Does this ring true for me? I think that's the bigger question that we have to ask ourselves and be willing to unlearn a lot of the things that we were taught that I think keep us in a perpetual state of wanting and a perpetual state of not being in our bliss. The third thing that I did, and it's something that I talk about in my book, Do You, it was really figuring out what I needed and pouring into myself. So for me, one of the things that I always talk about and what I'm a huge proponent of is self love, which is going beyond even self care. We throw around the term self care, which I think is a nice way for us to get in the practice of doing things to care for ourselves. But self love goes even beyond that. Self love is you loving yourself to the core, to the point of total acceptance of who you are and where you are in your walk, in your journey. So it's not just even the superficial, like, oh, I got a couple rolls and I'm going to love my body anyways, which is true. It's, I am both sweet and spicy. I am right and I'm wrong sometimes. I am generous and I can be, stingy if we down to the last wing. And I'm using silly examples, but we all have a little bit of what we would deem good and bad, or things that we are proud of and not so proud of. We've all done things that we wish we could take back, or we've all, probably cussed somebody out in traffic for cutting us off. That doesn't mean that you are not a kind or worthy or beautiful person on the inside. So that's what I mean about self love. And one of the ways that I found to show myself love is not only the accepting of all the things that I am along that spectrum, but also setting boundaries so that I am fully restored and fully taken care of. So self love to me is pouring into myself in ways like a lot of sleep. So I know myself. I know that I need at least 8 hours of sleep or it's not cute for me the next day. Self love is also being willing to say no to things that are not energetically aligned with me. I am a super enthusiastic person. Like, I get really excited about doing things, especially when I know it's going to be in service to someone. But I've had to learn in the recent years that even if I'm excited about it and want to help, I may not be able to help because it may not be loving and serving of me if I'm scheduled back to back. And so I cannot spread myself thin. That is not an act of self love, to just spread myself thin and not give myself the time that I need to restore. Self love is also honoring the things that I enjoy, making time to. I love listening to podcasts. I love music. I love spending time with my family and friends. I love reading. I love yoga. So I make time to do all of those things regularly. Those are my priorities because they feed me. Self love is also pleasure. I'll be talking a lot more about that this year, particularly with women. We don't honor our pleasure and our desires and our passions enough. And so making time for the things that I desire to do in this life, making time for my physical desires, like making sure that I have, a loving, intimate relationship with my partner. That's important to me. That is an act of self love. So there are so many ways that we can show love to ourselves that I think is crucial. And me finding my bliss was discovering that along the journey, that it is not selfish, it is self love to make sure that you are fully fed and taken care of, heart, mind, body, spirit. So I will leave you with a couple of ways that you can find your bliss. So I was meditating before I started this episode, and I was trying to get guidance. I go into meditation to get divine guidance, and I am thankful that I received such beautiful wisdom. And one of the things that came through that I wanted to share was, when you're thinking about bliss, lean into your heart. Listen to your heart. The best way to do that is to get quiet. And if you're saying, like, I have so many things and like I live a busy, noisy life, we all do. And we all can find some quiet time, even if it's 5 minutes. So find you a quiet space and give yourself even 5 minutes to just sit with yourself and ask yourself a couple of questions. One, sit, and I love to breathe first. Breathing is such a beautiful way to get back in touch with your body. If your mind races like mine has the tendency to do, breath will bring you back to your body. So take a few deep breaths and then ask yourself, what is it that I crave? Really think about, what is an experience that you crave to have? What is something that your heart truly desires that maybe you haven't even thought of because you've been so busy and just living life? So, what is it that your heart craves? Second question, ask yourself, what does it know to be true? So, what is on your heart? Maybe your heart knows that the job that you're in is not for you. Maybe when you sit with your heart, it will come up that the relationship you're in is not for you. Maybe it will come up that you've been denying a desire that you have to travel the world or start a new business or move to a different town. Whatever it is, that desire is there for a reason. And the road to your inner bliss is listening to and following those desires, to embrace whatever is coming up that you are craving in your heart or you know to be true. Listen to it and follow it as far as you can take it. And then when you can't take it any further, I promise you, something or someone will show up to help you take it that much further. That's how it works. When you're really relying on your core, that inspiration that comes from the divine, that is feeding through your heart, that is an expression of your inner bliss, there will always be help. There will always be help to take it to the next step, to the next level. So I hope that you take the time and space to sit with yourself and think about what it is that you crave, what it is that your heart knows to be true, so that you may find your inner bliss. I hope you'll stay tuned with me through this season. I have so many surprises in store, and ultimately, this is just us learning together about how we lead a blissful life. I hope you like, share, and subscribe for more, and have a beautiful, blissful rest of your week.